There is a plant sitting in more American backyards than almost anything else. It grows in the shade where nothing else will. It comes back every single year without being asked. It costs $10 at any garden center and lives for decades if you treat it right. And yet people kill it constantly. Not on purpose, not from neglect exactly, but from a specific set of mistakes that almost every gardener makes with hostas, usually because the information out there is either incomplete, vague, or just plain wrong. Here is what makes this particularly frustrating. Hostas are genuinely one of the most forgiving plants you can grow. They tolerate poor soil. They tolerate drought once established. They tolerate being divided, moved, ignored, and forgotten about for weeks at a time. When a hosta is struggling, it is almost never the plant's fault. It is almost always one of these 7 mistakes happening quietly in the background while the gardener assumes everything is fine. If your hostas look smaller than they should, if the leaves are yellowing or burning at the edges, if they never seem to fill out the way the plant tag promised, stay with me. Every single one of those problems has a specific cause and a specific fix, and we are going through all 7 of them right now. New here? Hit subscribe before we get into it. This channel is built around real answers to real gardening problems, the kind that actually change what your garden looks like from one season to the next. Let's go. Mistake 1. Planting them in too much sun. This is the #1 hosta mistake in American home gardening, and it happens for a completely understandable reason. You buy the plant in spring, the garden center has it sitting in full sun on an outdoor display rack. It looks beautiful and healthy, and you assume sun is fine. It is not fine, not for most hostas. Hostas evolved as woodland understory plants. In nature, they grow beneath a canopy of trees, receiving filtered light, dappled shade, and maybe a couple of hours of gentle morning sun at most. When you put that same plant in a spot that gets 6, 7, 8 hours of direct summer sun, especially afternoon sun in zones 6 and warmer, the leaves do something very specific and very telling. The edges turn crispy and brown. The color bleaches out from rich deep green or blue-green to a washed-out, tired yellow-green. The whole plant looks stressed because it genuinely is. There is a rule of thumb that experienced hosta growers use and almost never share publicly. The bluer the hosta, the more shade it needs. Blue hostas like Halcyon and Elegans get their color from a waxy coating on the leaf surface that literally melts off in direct sun. Once that coating is gone, it does not come back until the following season. You planted a blue hosta and it turned green by July. That is exactly what happened. The sun cooked off the wax. Gold and chartreuse hostas are the most sun-tolerant of the group, handling 3 to 4 hours of morning sun reasonably well. Green and blue varieties genuinely need 2 to 3 hours maximum, with shade through the hottest part of the day. If your hostas are in the wrong spot, the fix is a fall move. Hostas transplant exceptionally well in early fall when temperatures drop and the plant is beginning to wind down for the season. Move them to a shadier location and next spring you will see a completely different plant. Bigger, healthier, and the right color. Mistake 2. Planting the crown too deep. This mistake is quiet. It does not announce itself immediately. The plant goes in, it looks fine for a few weeks, and then it just never really takes off the way it should. It stays small. Growth is slow. And the gardener spends the next 2 seasons wondering what is wrong with the soil or the light when the answer is an inch of depth. The crown of a hosta, the point where the roots meet the emerging shoots, needs to sit right at soil level or no more than half an inch below it. When it goes in deeper than that, the plant expends enormous energy pushing new growth up through excess soil before it can even begin photosynthesizing. Some hostas will tolerate this and eventually work their way upward over a few seasons. Others will simply sit there, permanently stunted, never performing the way they should. The most common way this happens is through mulching. The plant goes in at the correct depth, but then 3 or 4 inches of mulch gets piled right up against the crown, year after year, until it is effectively buried. Walk through your garden right now and look at the base of each hosta. If you cannot clearly see the point where the roots begin, mulch is too close. Pull it back 4 to 6 inches from the crown, not from the plant, from the crown specifically. That one adjustment has revived hostas that gardeners had written off as permanently weak. Mistake 3. Overwatering young plants. This feels wrong to say about a plant that clearly loves moisture. Hostas do love consistent water. Established hostas handle drought better than most people realize. But young hostas, newly planted hostas in their first season in the ground, are far more vulnerable to overwatering than most gardeners understand. When a newly planted hosta sits in consistently soggy soil, the roots that are still developing and still fragile cannot access the oxygen they need to grow. They begin to rot at the tips. The plant cannot take up nutrients because the root system is compromised. And from above the soil line, the symptoms look almost identical to drought stress. Yellowing, wilting, slow growth, which causes many gardeners to respond by watering even more, accelerating the exact problem they are trying to solve. The correct approach in year 1 is deep, infrequent watering rather than light, daily watering. Once a week in normal conditions, more during genuine heat waves, always checking the soil before adding more water. Push 2 fingers into the soil near the base of the plant. If moisture is still present from the previous watering, leave it alone entirely. Let the top 2 inches dry out between waterings. The roots will grow downward in search of moisture, which is exactly the deep root structure you want going into year 2. Once a hosta is established, genuinely established, meaning 2 full seasons in the ground, it becomes one of the more drought-tolerant shade plants you can grow. Getting through that first season correctly is what unlocks that toughness. Before we go further, if this video is giving you answers that your hostas have needed for a while, subscribe right now. Hit the bell so the next video finds you automatically. Every week, this channel goes this deep on exactly these kinds of problems, and you do not want to miss what is coming next. Mistake 4. Ignoring slug. Damn until it is too late. You wake up one morning in June and your hostas look like someone spent the night going at them with a hole punch. Dozens of small, irregular holes across every leaf, edges ragged and chewed. The plants look attacked because they were, just not by anything you are likely to see during the day. Slugs feed exclusively at night and in wet conditions. By morning, they have retreated into the soil, under mulch, beneath nearby rocks, anywhere cool and damp. The damage they leave behind looks dramatic, and for many gardeners, the first instinct is to assume a disease, a fungal problem, or a nutrient deficiency. It is almost never any of those things. It is almost always slugs. The real mistake is not getting slugs. Every shaded, moist garden has them. The mistake is ignoring the early signs until the damage is severe, and then applying the wrong solution too late in the season to matter. Here is what actually works. Slug-resistant hosta varieties exist, and they are worth seeking out intentionally. Hostas with thick, heavily textured, corrugated leaves are dramatically less appealing to slugs than thin-leaved varieties. Sum and Substance, Empress Wu, and Halcyon are all noticeably more resistant than thin-leaved varieties like Lancifolia. Choosing the right variety is your first line of defense before you ever deal with a single slug. For existing infestations, iron phosphate-based slug bait, sold under brand names like Sluggo, is safe around children, pets, and wildlife, breaks down into a soil amendment, and is genuinely effective when applied consistently. Scatter it around the perimeter of affected plants at the first sign of damage, not after the leaves are already destroyed. Diatomaceous earth applied as a barrier works well in dry conditions, but needs reapplication after every rain. One thing that makes slug problems dramatically worse is thick mulch piled right up to the crown. Mulch is slug habitat. Keep it pulled back from the base of each plant, and you remove the shelter that makes your garden so hospitable to them in the first place. Mistake 5. Dividing too early or not at all. Most gardeners fall into one of 2 camps with hosta division. Either they divide too soon, pulling apart a young plant that has not yet reached its full size or established a strong enough root system to tolerate the stress of being split. Or they never divide at all, watching a once vigorous clump slowly lose energy as it becomes overcrowded over many years. Both are mistakes, and both produce the same result, a hosta that performs well below what it is actually capable of. The right time to divide a hosta is when the clump has been in the ground for at least 3 to 4 years and has clearly reached its mature spread. The visible sign that division is genuinely needed is a weakening center. The middle of the clump produces noticeably smaller, less vigorous shoots, while the outer edges still look healthy. That pattern tells you the root mass has become too congested to sustain full production across the entire plant. Divide in early spring before the shoots have fully unfurled, or in early fall when temperatures have cooled. Spring division is marginally less stressful for the plant because it has the entire growing season ahead to reestablish. Use a sharp spade and cut cleanly through the root mass. Each division needs a minimum of 3 to 5 healthy eyes, the growth points you can see at the crown. Replant immediately at the correct depth, water deeply, and keep consistently moist for the first several weeks. One established hosta clump divided correctly can yield 4, 6, sometimes 8 viable new plants depending on the original size. At current nursery prices, that is real money from a single morning of work in your own garden. Mistake 6. Cutting the leaves back in fall too early. Every autumn, the instinct kicks in. Tidy the garden, cut things back, clean everything up before winter arrives. And with hostas, this instinct causes a specific problem that carries directly into the following spring. Hosta leaves, even as they yellow and die back in fall, are still transferring energy downward into the crown and root system. That process continues until the first hard frost stops it. Gardeners who cut the foliage back in September or early October, while leaves are still in the process of dying back naturally, interrupt that energy transfer at exactly the moment it matters most. The plant goes into winter with less stored energy than it should have, and the following spring's emergence is noticeably slower and weaker as a direct result. Leave the foliage standing until after the first hard frost has fully collapsed it. At that point, the transfer is complete and the leaves have no further function. Cut them back then, remove them from the bed entirely rather than leaving them as mulch since they can harbor slug eggs and disease over winter, and let the crown go dormant on its own schedule. If you are in a zone where temperatures drop sharply, a light layer of shredded bark mulch over the crown after cutback provides insulation without creating the moisture trap that solid mulch does. 2 to 3 inches is sufficient. More than that creates conditions slugs will find very comfortable come spring. Mistake 7. Choosing the wrong variety for the space. This last mistake is made at the garden center before the plant ever goes in the ground, which is exactly what makes it so difficult to diagnose later. Hostas range from miniatures the size of a teacup to giants that reach 4 feet tall and 6 feet across at maturity. The plant tag at the garden center tells you the mature size, but that size is reached over 5 to 7 years, not one season. A small, manageable-looking plant in a 4-inch pot can become something that dominates an entire garden bed by the time it reaches full size, crowding out everything around it and requiring division every few years just to keep it contained. The opposite problem is equally common. A gardener buys a large, impressive-looking hosta, Empress Wu, Sum and Substance, or one of the other giant varieties, and plants it in a space that is simply too small for what it will eventually become. The plant spends years struggling against its own boundaries, never reaching the performance it is capable of because the space cannot accommodate its root system properly. Before you buy, measure the space you are filling. Research the specific variety's mature dimensions, not the size it will be in year 2, but the actual mature spread it reaches at full establishment. For small borders and container planting, look at varieties in the miniature and small categories. Blue Mouse Ears, Pandora's Box, and Cameo are all beautiful, well-behaved, and appropriately sized for contained spaces. For filling large shaded areas efficiently, the giants earn their place and their price. Matching variety to space from the beginning saves years of frustration, unnecessary division, and replanting costs that add up quickly. 7 mistakes. And if you have been honest with yourself going through this list, at least one of them is almost certainly happening in your garden right now. Here is what matters most about that. Not one of these problems is permanent. A hosta in too much sun can be moved this fall. A crown buried under mulch can be uncovered this afternoon. A slug problem can be addressed this week before the damage gets worse. A variety that is too large for its space can be divided and relocated next spring. Hostas are not difficult plants. They are misunderstood plants. And the difference between a hosta that sits there looking tired for years and one that fills a shaded corner with dramatic, beautiful foliage every single season often comes down to 1 or 2 of the things we just covered. If this video helped you understand what has been holding your hostas back, subscribe right now. Next week, this channel goes just as deep into the next problem your garden needs answered. Hit the bell and it will find you automatically. Before you go, drop one comment. Tell me which of these 7 mistakes matched what is happening in your own garden, and tell me what zone or state you are gardening in. I read every single comment, and your answers directly shape what this channel covers next. Go check on those hostas. You already know what to look for.